This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, Bruchim Abayim, welcome everyone. Shalom Aleichem to the Kala Agar de Perka. Fine Labor Day afternoon. Tavshin Pei-Beis Chodesh Elul as we prepare for Parshas Seitzei. By way of introduction, I want to let everybody know about a wonderful opportunity. Bez Hashem, we're completing the Sefer on Shemais that's being completed and going for publication. If anybody wants to be mishtatev in the Sefer, please let us know. And Tavei Aleichem Bracha. Okay, Parshas Seitzei. We have a little passage, a small passage, about somebody who committed presumably a sin, and he's liable to the death penalty. And Chazal say that anyone who's given the death penalty is hung, is actually hanged. And the Torah warns us to not leave his body hanging overnight. V'chiyah v'ish chet. The man will have a sin, mishpat maves, a sentence of death, v'humas, and you'll kill him. V'salisa oisai alaitz, and you'll hang him on a tree. Loi solin nivlasai alaitz. Do not let his carcass remain hanging on the tree. Ki kavar tikbarenu bayemahu. You should surely bury him on that day. Ki kilalas eloi kim taloi. The curse of God is hanging. Meaning, man was created in the image of Hashem. It almost looks as if kiviyachal, it's the Ribbon Shalom. V'loi setame asad mascha. Do not contaminate your land. Asher Hashem leikecha noisin l'chanachla. That Hashem your God gives you as an inheritance. Now, on this pasuk, there's a tradition that eulogies have been given for various gedolim throughout history, where this pasuk is interpreted in a incredible way, in a Kabbalistic way. And one of the first instances that this Hesped appeared is in a Sefer Chavos Yair, written by Rabbi Elazar Kalir, not to be confused with the Paitan. Rabbi Elazar Kalir was the author of Sefer Aryakar, also Chavos Yair, not to be confused with Rabbi Yair Bachrach. And he's someone who wrote Sefer Or Chadash ala Torah on the 5 Megillos, on Mesachas Psachim, Mesachas Kedushin, and he gave a Hesped in 1785. This book was published in 1792. And he writes that he heard in the name of the great Goin, the Ramah, that when the Ramah's father-in-law, Rav Shalom Shachna, now Rav Shalom Shachna was the recognized Gadol Hadar in all of Europe. The Chayz of Lublin would say that while all the rabbis who are buried in Poland, they migrate to Eretz Yisrael once they are buried, except for Rav Shalom Shachna. He is the guardian of the city of Lublin. In fact, in the Sefer She'eres Yisrael, he brings that the Ramah was the son-in-law of Rav Shalom Shachna. Shalom Shachna was the great Rosh Yeshiva in Europe. He was Marbitz Torah for 40 years without taking any money. Then the Ramah's Gemara in Sanhedrin Daf Tzadik Ches, where it talks about the name of the Mashiach, the Ramah wrote on the side of the page, Ani Oimer, I say Shachna Shemai. His name is Shachna. In other words, Ramah was saying that his Rebbe, his father-in-law, was the Mashiach. Like it says, L'shichna Yisid Rashenu. And when Rav Shalom Shachna passed away, his son-in-law, the Ramah, gave a Hesped. And the Ramah said in his Hesped an incredible interpretation of this pasuk. V'chiyah be'ish chet. If a man will be chet. Chet could mean not sin, but missing. Like Bathsheba and David, like Bathsheba said to David, that when you die, David, then I and your son Shlomo will be chataim, missing from Gedula. Or like the pasuk, koileya el hasa'ara v'lo yechta. You could shoot the slingshot at a hair's breadth and not miss. So kihia be'ish chet. If a person is missing, Mishpat Maves, a reason to die. They're a tzaddik gamor. They have no sin in their repertoire. Vihumas, and even though they're missing a reason to die, they died. V'salisa oisai alates, hang it on a tree. Blame it on the sin of Adam Harishain. You know why they died? Why'd they die? They didn't sin. They died because of the primordial sin of Adam, because of the Eitz Hadas. And this is what the Ramah said about his father-in-law, Rav Shalom Shachna, that he is in fact that type of individual, that he is chait, he's missing, mishpat maves, a reason to die, and yet v'humas, the only reason he died is v'salisa oisai alates. Like we find in the Gemara, Arba Mesu be'etyoy shel Nachash, or 4 people in history who never sinned, and the only reason they died is because of the sin of the Eitz Hadas, because of the bite of the snake. Who are the 4 people who never sinned? They were Binyamin, the son of Yaakov, Amram, the father of Moshe, Yishai, the father of David, Kilav, the son of David. This was the Hesped that Rabbi Elazar Kalir gave. This was the Hesped. Rabbi Elazar HaKalir gave this Hesped about. By the way, Rabbi Elazar Kalir was the rabbi in Zavlodov, in Rachnitz, and in Kalin. And he gave this Hesped, and he quoted over the Hesped the Ramah said about his father-in-law. Now what's interesting is Rav Shalom Shachna passed away in 1558 on Rosh Chodesh Kislev. And not for 234 years did we ever hear a word that the Ramah eulogized his father-in-law as such. So here we have a report. Rabbi Elazar Kalir says that the Ramah eulogized his father-in-law, and yet we have no record in any of the Sifrei Kodesh that in fact this was the Hesped that the Ramah gave to Rav Shalom Shachna. Interestingly, there's a Sefer, Yerach HaIsanim, of Rabbi Avram Rappaport, who does not quote the Ramah's Hesped. Now this Sefer, Yerach HaIsanim, Eisan HaEzrachi, was published with the Sefer Eisan HaEzrachi, and he does not say the Ramah gave this interpretation at the eulogy of his father-in-law, but rather he says he heard in the name of the Ramah, and he adds another point. Because what does the pasuk mean? Chet mishmat maves, a sin of a judgment to die. It should say he has a mishmat maves, he has a judgment to die. What does the word chet mean? And he quotes the Ramah that interprets that the word chet means missing. And I have over here in the Sefer B'chagvei Hasela, a Reb Chagai Preshel quotes his father, Rav Tovia Preshel, who was a great Jewish traveler, and he traveled to Spain to speak to conversos. He traveled throughout the Jewish world. He was like the modern day Rabbi Binyamin of Tudela. And he was a scholar, a researcher, a writer. He wrote for many publications. And he is somewhat incredulous that how could it be that the Ramah gave this Hesped for Rav Shalom Shachna in 1558, and we have no record of this Hesped until the year 1792. I mean, is that even possible? That 234 years go by and we have no record of this? Yes, and the Yerach HaIsanim says he heard the Ramah said this interpretation. But why is this not on record? And then what's interesting is, there's another tradition that this Hesped was not given by Rav Moshe Isserlis for Rav Shalom Shachna, but this Hesped was given by one of the all-time great giants and mystics and Kabbalists, none other than the Arizal. And the Arizal gave this Hesped over upon the demise of one of the great all-time Mekubalim himself, the Ramak. But interestingly and strangely, the only place this is quoted is in the Yaros Devasha, Rav Yonasan Eibeshitz, that he says the Arizal gave a Hesped for the Ramak on the pasuk in this week's Parsha, Kiyeh Beish Chet Mishpat Maves, that if a man will be missing a reason to die because he didn't do any sin, and why did he die? Hinged on the tree because of the Eitz Hadas. You know, it's interesting that Rav Preschel points out that here we have it, that which we have hearsay that the Ramah gave over this Hesped and Rav Shalom Shachna, some say, namely Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi says that the Arizal said it about the Ramak. This is the earliest source in our repertoire of the Hesped that Ari gave for a Moshe Cordovero. Now, this is very interesting because Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi came to the Kehilos of Ehu, Altona, Hamburg, Vansbeck in the year 1750, the end of the year Tavkov Yud. He was Nifter in Chodesh Elul, Tavkov Chavdal, 1764. That means he gave this drasha somewhere between 1751 and 1764. The second chelik of the Yaris Devash, where this Hesped is published, was published in 1782. Basically, the Ramak, who passed away in 1570, 210 years go by before we have a record of what the Ari said at his Levaya. What's even more interesting is the Chida. I remember I heard this many years ago. This Hesped, I heard over that the Arizal was maspid the Ramak with this interpretation of the pasuk. I heard this from Rav Olbaum, quoting the Chida, and I looked. It's not in the Shem HaGedolim, but it's in the Chida's commentary to this week's Parsha, Nachal Kidumim, from 1724 to 1806, where the Chida says on this pasuk in number 8, V'chiyeh be'ish chet mishpat maves v'humas v'salisa oisay alates, that the Arizal said at the Ramak's Levaya, that if a man will be missing a reason to die because he's a tzaddik gomer and he has no sin, why did he die? V'salisa oisay alates, hinged on the tree. Now, where did the Chida get this from? There's no question the Chida got this from Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi. The Chida lived 1724 to 1806. He lived 82 years. And the Nachal Kidumim, Rav Preschel brings, was published in Livorno for the first time between 1795 and 1797, shortly after the Yaris Devash was published. There's no question the Yaris Devash is the source of the Chida. In fact, in the Chida Sefer Dvarim Achadim, there he brings an interpretation on the pasuk Loisalin Nivlasai Ala Eitz, that a person should do tshuva on the very same day that he sinned, because a sin is like a nevala, and man is called a tree. And then he says, that's what the Yaris Devash says. And then he brings, by the way, the Yaris Devash brings that the Ari said as a Hesped on the Ramak, B'chiyah be'ish chet mishmat maves, if you're missing a reason to die, the salisa oisay alates. So we have two unusual Hespedim. A Hesped the Ramah gave for Rav Shalom Shachna, and there is no record of it from the year 1558 when Rav Shalom Shachna died until 1792 when the Ar Chadash was published. We have more than 200 years go by, 234 years go by, no record of the Hesped. From the death of the Ramak in 1570 until 1782, we have no record that Arizal gave this Hesped for the Ramak. That's the first difficulty Rav Preschel raises. But there's even more, in my mind, even more difficulty. And that is, the Arizal had a student. The students of the Ari were called the Gurei HaArizal, the young lion cubs of the Ari. And there was somebody by the name of Rav Mordechai HaKohen, who was a student of Rabbi Yisrael D. Corial, who lived from 1504 to 1573, who was a student of the Ari. And Rav Mordechai HaKohen was in Tzfas, and because of financial hardship, he became a rabbi in Aleppo. And he writes in his commentary to the Torah, which has become recognized as a classic commentary. It's an unusual commentary because it's like a combination and fusion of Pshat and Kabbalah. He brings over here number 11, V'chiyeh be'ish chet mishpat maves. Someone who was given death, heaven punished the person. And you want to say to yourself, well, this person is a tzaddik gamor. The only thing it did wrong, this person never sinned. You're going to say, he's chet mishpat maves. He's missing a reason to die. Vehumas, and he died. No, loisalin nivlasay aleitz. Don't hang this abomination on the tree. Don't think such a thought. Such a thought is a nevala. It's disgusting. You're gonna blame the death of this person on Adam Arishain. Kavar tikbarenu. Bury the thought. Don't bring it in your mind. Loisalin. Don't contaminate your body with such a thought. You have to believe that Ein Misa B'lai Chet. God is righteous and His judgment is righteous. That's a corruption, what you're thinking. So the very pshat that the Chavos Yair attributes, that the Ramah said about Reb Shalom Shachna, and that Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshitz and the Chida attribute, that the Arizal said about the Ramak, the student of the Ari interprets the pasuk not only not like this, not only against it, but he interprets the pasuk that such a notion is a abomination. It's disgusting. That if you see someone who died, and you say, oh, he's such a tzaddik, why did he die? It must be, he died because of the sin of Adam Arishai. No, loisalin nivlasei, don't think such a thought. Chas v'sham to mention such a thought. It's disgusting, such a thought. It's abominable. It's despicable. Loisalin nivlasei, nevala. This hashkafa is a nevala, says the Shach. Kavar tikbrena, bury the thought. So, on the one hand, we have two traditions, that this hashkafa was interpreted by none other than the Ramah about Rav Shalom Shachna, the Arizal about the Ramak, and yet Rav Mordechai HaKoyen, the student of Yisrael Di Kurial, in the Seitzei Koyen, he interprets that not only can this pasuk be interpreted otherwise, but that it is actually interpreted that the idea that is attributed to Ramah and Arizal is abominable and disgusting. Now, if the Ari said this about the Ramak, you don't think his student, the Shach HaTorah, would have known that and would have known not to say that such a thought is an abomination? He's living in Sas. You don't think he would have known about this? By the way, to throw into the mix, the Shlah HaKadosh interprets the pasuk v'chiyeh beish chet mishpat maves v'humas v'salisai oisai al eitz. He quotes Tikunei Zohar that if you see somebody missing a reason to die, then attribute it to the sin of Adam Arishain. And again, Reb Prashel says, if the Ari gave this as a hesped upon the demise of the Ramak, why would the Shla, who is a student of a student, if the Ari said this about the Ramak, if the Ramah said this about Rav Shalom Shachna, the Shla was a student of Rav Shalom Shachna. His father, Rabbi Avram, was a student of the Ramah. If the Ramah gave such a hesped, you don't think the Shla would know about it? Why does he have to quote Tikunei Zohar? Why couldn't he say this is what our Rebbe, the Ramah, said about Rav Shalom Shachna? So Rav Prashel says that in his mind, it's very unlikely that this was given as a hesped of the by the Ramah for Reb Shalom Shachna. Because the Ramah gave it as a Hesped, why wouldn't the Shla know this? Why would he just say it quoting the Tikkunei Zayhar? So to that question, I personally would say, why quote a story if you could quote an actual source? Why quote hearsay when you could quote a Makar Ne'eman? But Reb Prashel continues that to say that Arizal said it about the Ramak, so then how could the student, the Shachal HaTorah, not only not interpret the pasuk that way, but interpret the pasuk that such a thought is nevala, is abominable, is disgusting. And therefore he says that in all probability the story got garbled. And he quotes a sefer called Shneim Asar Drushim, 12 drashos, given by somebody by the name of Shmuel Yehuda Katzenellenbogen, who is a great-grandson of the Maharimins. He lived from 1521 to 1597. He died in Padua. I had the privilege to be at his kever in Padua. He was the son of the Maharam Katzenellenbogen, Maharam Mintz, Rabbi Meir Katzenellenbogen. And he is giving a hesped in the ghetto for somebody by the name of Zalman Katz, and he darshans the pasuk. You see a man, kiyeh be'ish, ish is a lashon of tzadikim, chashuvim, and yet even though there's no person that's righteous in the world that does good and doesn't sin, but you wonder why would he have died? Could he have done a sin that he's worthy of the death penalty? So why did he die? Kiyeh be'ish chet. If man will be missing mishpat maves, a reason to die. The reason is vehumas. You know why he died? Because of the sins of the generation. Like Chazal say in many places, tzaddikim are accountable for the sins of the generations. So vehumas, he actually did not die because of his own sins. He died because of the sins of others. Or v'salisa oisay, hinge it on the tree. Hinge it on the tree. It's not because of what he did, it's because of the sin of Adam Arishain. So here we have a hesped that was given by Rav Shmuel Yehuda Katzenellenbogen. It was published in 1594, and it was not published again for 200 years. Rav Tuvia Prashel conjectures that this is the source of this supposed hesped. It was not said by the Ramah for Reb Shalom Shachna, otherwise the Shlo would have known about it. It was not said by the Ari for the Ramak, otherwise the Shachal HaTorah would have known about it and he wouldn't have darshaned otherwise. But rather it is sourced in a hesped Reb Shmuel Katzenellenbogen gave for Rav. By the way, Reb Shmuel Yehuda Katzenellenbogen was otherwise known as Shek. Shmuel Yehuda Katzenellenbogen. And this is the source of the hesped, and in the course of time, because the sefer was not in print, various versions emerged, and the names got a little bit garbled, and some attributed it to Ramah, and some attributed it to the Arizal, but in fact, it's unlikely it was the Ramah, then the Shla would have known about it. It's unlikely it was the Arizal, otherwise the Shach would have known about it. This is not completely satisfying to me. Number one, to me it's not fully compelling that if the Ramah would have said it about Rav Shalom Shachna, the Shla would have quoted it. Why does the Shla have to quote that as a source? Why would that be better than Tikkunei Zayar? Why not go straight to the real source? It definitely is somewhat questionable that if the Ari said it about the Ramak, then why was it not discovered until the times of Yonis and Eibeshitz? And why would the Shachal HaTorah interpret the pasuk that this is such a nevala? But here's the point that I would like to analyze, and which is the most troubling to me. If you would have asked Rabbi Yonis and Eibeshitz, if you would have asked the Chida, if you would have asked the Chavos Yair, Is it a legitimate hashkafa that if you see someone who appears to be a tzaddik die without just cause, is it a legitimate hashkafa to say, you know what, they didn't sin, the reason why they died is because of the sin of the Eitz Hadas? Is that legitimate? They would say, of course it is. The Chida would say, yeah, the Arizal said that about the Ramak. Rabbi Yehuda would say, yeah, the Ari said about the Ramak. Whether the Ari did or not, Rav Parsha would argue he didn't, but the Chida says he did, or based on Rabbi Yehuda who says he did. So these Gedolei Yisrael held that this was a legitimate hashkafa. And yet if you ask the Shach, if you see a seemingly righteous person die, is it legitimate to say, oh, they died because of the sin of the Eitz Hadas? He would say, not only is it not legitimate, it's disgusting to say that. So how could you have such a wide machlokes? I understand in many areas in Judaism there's different opinions. That's part of having a maturity in learning, recognizing the different viewpoints and different attitudes and different perspectives. But to have such a wide machlokes, that the Chida and Rabbi Yehuda and the Chavos Yair would say that this is a true and valid hashkafa, that you could have a seemingly righteous person and say, you know what, he died only because of the sin of Adam. And yet the Shach would say, that is so wrong, it's forbidden, it's disgusting. How could you have such a wide machlokes? So I want to suggest 3 approaches to reconcile and bring closer these 2 viewpoints. And then, in a sense, it's not such a wide machlokes. Somebody passes away, and somebody has to give a eulogy. Are you allowed to exaggerate? Are you allowed to stretch the truth? Oh, he's such a tzaddik, he always learned. He always learned. He learned most days of the week. Are you allowed to say he learned every day? He never missed a minyan. Out of 90 minyanim a week, he only missed 20. He never missed. Are you allowed to exaggerate? Are you allowed to exaggerate at a Hesped? So there's a Taz in Yoredea. He says, yeah, you're allowed to exaggerate a little bit. And there are different ways of explaining that Taz. The words of the Taz are, because everybody, if they would have been able to, they would have done a little bit more. Let's say a guy gives $100 to tzedakah. Why doesn't he give 117? He doesn't have 117. But probably if he would have had 117, he would have given 117. So you're allowed to say the guy is a little better than he is because he would have been if he could. That's one way of saying it. Others say, because we underestimate a person's greatness, they're usually a little bit better than we think they are. So maybe it's like this. If you see somebody pass away, are you allowed to say to yourself, I don't understand the ways of God. This person was such a tzaddik. Why'd they die? Why'd they die? I mean, how do you know he never did an Avera? He never was nichshol in Avera. There are many Averos, chamuros, that are very easy to be nichshol in. So why are you questioning the ways of Hashem? Well, must be he died because of the sin of Adam HaRishon. You're not allowed to think that. You're not allowed to question God's ways that way. That's prohibited. That's disgusting. Why are you challenging Hashem? You have no right to question Hashem. It is prohibited to say about someone who died, they never sinned, and we don't understand the ways of Hashem, they died because of the sin of Adam HaRishon. But Rabbi Yehuda and the Chida say, the Arizal said that at the Hesped of the Ramak. At a Hesped, you're allowed to say that. You're allowed to exaggerate that even if the person maybe did a few things that might have been wrong, you're allowed to say at the Hesped, they never did anything wrong. You're allowed to exaggerate a little bit at a Hesped. The fact that the Shachal HaTorah says it's disgusting to think that may not be a contradiction to the fact that the Rabbi Yehuda and the Chida say that Ari said it at the Hesped of the Ramak, or that the Ramah said at the Hesped of Shalom Shachna. These Gedolim knew there's no human being that's perfect, except for maybe the 4 people that the Gemara mentions who never sinned. But they're allowed to say at a Hesped, sort of an exaggerated Hesped, because that's the halacha. You're allowed to say that a person's a little bit better than he really is. But you can't really think that. You can't really think, the Lord took him away for no cause. No, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not going to do a din below din. That's one way to reconcile the Shita of Rabbi Glatstein and the Chida and the Chavos Yair with the Shachal HaTorah. The only thing is, this is still difficult. Because the Shla HaKadosh interprets the pasuk in Chumash that if you see somebody who's missing a reason to die and he died hinged on the sin of the Yetz Hadas, the Shla is not saying that this is what you could say at a Hesped. He's interpreting the pasuk in the Chumash this way, straight up. Likewise, the Sefer Yarech Hoisanim is saying that the Ramah interpreted the pasuk this way, not that he gave a Hesped. So you can't say, by a Hesped you could exaggerate, but you can't think that. But the Shla says you could think that. Here's another possibility. If somebody sees a person that died, even a big tzaddik, you're not allowed to say, the person never sinned, and he really shouldn't have died. Why did he die? I don't know. It's Adam HaRishon's fault. Don't blame it on Adam HaRishon. You know how to say that. You're not even allowed to say it about a tzaddik. And a tzaddik can't say it about a regular person. But if you're an Arizal, you could say it about the Ramak. If you're a Ramah, you could say it about a Reb Shalom Shachna. A regular person, to say when they go to a funeral of, I don't understand why the person went, he's such a great tzaddik, why did God do this? You're not allowed to think that, you're not allowed to say that. You can't even say it at a eulogy. But someone of the caliber of Arizal, someone of the caliber of Ramah, to say it about someone of the caliber of Shalom Shachna, to say it someone of the caliber of Ramak, they could say it. Again, this is still not completely satisfying because the Shla interprets the pasuk straight up. And the Shla is not saying that, this is referring to, a tzaddik who's echad, v'miyuchad. And here's a third possibility that maybe has the most merit of all. And that is, one cannot say if they see someone who dies, I don't understand why the person died. It's completely, it doesn't make any sense to me. Why'd the person die? It's a mystery. I can't understand it. No, you're not allowed to say that. To say about somebody they never sinned? I don't understand why the person died. They have no averos. You're not allowed to say somebody has no averos. You think God took them away and they didn't do anything? Ein tzaddik ba'aretz asher ya'aseh toiv b'lo yachta. To say that someone is missing any sin at all, and to throw all the blame on Adam and all the blame on the judgment of Shamayim, you can't do that. Rav Shmuel Yehuda Katzenollenbogen, the way he says it is, granted the person may have done something wrong, because Ein tzaddik ba'aretz asher ya'aseh toiv b'lo yachta, but he's missing a reason to die. He sinned. He has infractions. He's done things wrong. But there's nothing that he did that's so wrong, that's so grave, that's so severe that he should die. That you're allowed to say. You're allowed to say, this person was a very good person. Why did he die? And we're not saying he never did an Aveira, but why did he die? He died because of the sin of the Yetz Hadas. But to say the person has no sin at all, that the Shachal HaTorah calls a Navala. Mar Rabbi Sai, So throughout history, we have these two legends that the Ramah said at the Hesped of Rav Shalom Shachna, that the Arizal said at the Hesped of the Ramak, and that's recorded by Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshitz, and also Ne'atak by the Chida. And what's a little bit difficult is that we have a student of the Chida, the Shach, that interprets the pasuk the exact opposite way, namely to maintain such an idea, such a notion, is loisalin nivlasai, it's an avala, it's abominable. And based on that, Reb Prashel is sort of somewhat incredulous regarding the authenticity of those legends. But on the other hand, whether the Ari said it or whether Ramah said it, Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshitz held he could have, and the Chida held he could have, and the Chavazir held he could have. So we have to try to reconcile these two viewpoints, and we offered a number of different interpretations that a Hesped might be different. It might be different if the subject matter is Ramak or the Shalom Shachna, and it might depend how it's articulated. Whether you say there's no sin at all might be not the best way to go. Okay, Rabbi, great to see everybody today. Have a great day. Bracha v'atzlacha. We'll see you next Monday. B'siyata d'shmaya. Kol tov. Kol tov, kol tov.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.